That music was brought to you and played by Steve Miller, my brother-in-law, and produced by Lainey Miller, my niece. In today's episode of Outside Insights, we're hosting Dr. Colleen Perry Keith, the 14th president and the first female president of Goldey Beacom College. Colleen has been recognized for outstanding leadership. Colleen has received numerous accolades, including a South Carolina Career Woman of the Year Award and a Women in Business honorary recognition by Delaware Today magazine. She serves on several prestigious boards in her field. These are going to be a mouthful, but I'm going to do my best. The Partnership Board of Directors and the Division II Executive Board of the National Collegiate Athletic Association. My favorite part of Colleen is she's known for her accessibility and openness. And to personalize this, she was crazy enough to ask me to deliver a commencement speech at her college during COVID. You're a perfect guest for Outside Insights. My whole goal was to help subscribers and listeners, of which there's 60,000, close their personal and professional gaps. So welcome to our podcast.
Well, thank you. And you were an awesome commencement speaker, by the way.
I'm not paying her to say that. You can never hear that enough. I will say, excellent. I can't decide if it was harder to do it recorded or live.
Yeah. Well, and I got to listen. We had 6 commencements that year because it was COVID. So I got to listen to that 6 times and it never got old. And I learned something new every time. So it really, people liked it.
Well, my sense is that there's something in there that's relevant in this dialogue with you today, Colleen, because here I was delivering a message about people maybe needing to understand themselves as they were putting everything they have economically and time-wise into a career and a path in academia. And here my message was, make sure you know yourself, and for you to allow me to do that, I really appreciate it. And it shows your understanding of careers in the world.
Well, thank you. You were awesome.
So you obviously have a passion for higher education. Where'd that come from?
Well, that's a great question. I was born and raised in Northern New York, very small town, very Appalachian-like. And out of the 110 or 120 people in my high school graduating class, very few of us went on to college. And the whole reason I went on was, that was kind of the path I saw for myself. But I also had teachers and my parents who were very clear that this is, you can stay here and you will not, economically, you're not going to thrive. You'll do okay, and we've done okay, but college education is your way to, be economically secure later on in life. It's your way to have, that kind of financial security. And then when I was, at one point in my life, I was working on a graduate degree in actually counseling at the University of Pittsburgh. So I ended up in Pittsburgh at some point. And so I'm getting this degree. And I started working after that in the temporary help industry. Or actually, it's right before I started working in the temporary help industry. And what I was seeing were, I was the person who worked in the office and filled orders for kind of like placers.
Yes.
So I had, companies that were looking for employees, and I was in the Pittsburgh area. And when I was there, it was the mid 1980s, and the steel industry had changed how things were working. So steel mills in the Pittsburgh area were closing. Steel operations were moving overseas or to Mexico, other places. And all of these union steel workers were out of work.
And showing up.
Yeah. And so they're coming into the Kelly Services office, who I worked for, and they're saying, I need a job. And they're used to union steel wages, which are, $30, $40 an hour back then. The best I could do was minimum wage, maybe a little bit over minimum wage, and certainly not heavy industry. We were, we had light industry positions. So I couldn't do anything to help these people who were trying to put food on the table for their families. And there wasn't much I could do.
Because I think what you're alluding to perhaps, or maybe I'm just sensing it, it's that they needed a job, but it was the understanding of needing skills or the understanding of needing to change their mindset, or
Yeah,
that they weren't. It's hard to think about, but the market didn't bear what they used to get, right?
exactly. And I kept looking at it saying, how can we help these people? Well, you can't, there's not a lot you can do at that point. It needed to have been done years before that,
Yes.
where, in junior high and in high school, people began to understand who they were and what they could do well, and then, get trained for what you needed to do. College is one option. It's not the only option, and it shouldn't be the only option because not everybody's meant to be in college. I see that every year. Having been a college president for a number of years and spent my entire career almost in higher ed.
And
But
can you pick out from the beginning, first day, who's not good?
sometimes you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That there's just not, they're not ready for it. It's not their time to be here, or it's just not where their interests lie or where their skills lie.
yeah,
So I got really concerned about how do we help these people to become gainfully employed when they don't have transferable skills. We got to do something to help them. And I became convinced that, working in education is where I could go and help people to be able to achieve economic security through education. I see it in my life. I see it in my friends that I grew up with lives, my family. And that's what I felt like they needed. And so that became really my passion and my interest. I always did well in school, but I never really thought about working in education. I actually thought about HR.
So I didn't
Which,
realize the staffing industry overlap. And, my first job offer out of school was with Bethlehem Steel, and they said my job would be to lay off 6,000 people over 3 years.
oh my gosh.
So I realized that when I looked around, I was 6'5", 230, and that maybe it had less to do with my brain and more to do with that I could,
You're going to
handle.
need it. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
a horse.
I'm going to need it. Right. So, but do you, so I'm curious. It seems, higher education, you've allowed me into your school. You're very accessible, very open. I see you meet the local marketplace head on. How much of higher education is upskilling? Because that's what I think about reskilling. You talk about those steel workers. It was a little late and hard for them, but they really needed to learn new skills.
Yes.
Is higher education, and do you focus on that, or am just curious?
Not all of higher ed does. Your community colleges usually do because they're more workforce oriented. But colleges like Goldey Beacom can and do, and we're starting to a lot more here because the world has changed. You don't have the same number of 18 to 22-year-olds pursuing higher education any longer. And you've got people coming back. And so not every college embraces that workforce focus and the need to upskill in a very intentional way. Typically, you see that at the community college level where they spend a lot of time on that, or career type colleges. Goldey College kind of falls in the middle of all that. And
Okay.
so that is a focus that we've done. We've actually created a bunch of new certificates specifically at the graduate level because it's a little easier to create them at the graduate level. We'll bring them on board at the undergrad level, but you can do it easier at the graduate level and stack certificates into degrees at that level. At the undergrad level, you have more of a traditional focus that you have to kind of navigate within.
So you have more flexibility at a graduate level. Is that
Yeah.
You and I have talked about how long it takes to build content and curriculum. Is that the world's speeding up so fast?
Yes, it is.
How do you, as president, manage that cycle? I'm sure employers show up your doorstep and say, "We need the following skills," and
yeah.
How do you place that bet on new degrees? And
yeah, we listen. We have a career advisory board, and we listen carefully to them and what they're telling us they need, and then we bring that information back to the faculty. We also listen carefully at all our career fairs, and we bring that back to the faculty. And I've got a person who does some instructional design stuff for us, where she takes a look at what those new ideas are, pulls together what are the classes that could address that, and the creation of new classes that could address that. And then we get it right through the faculty process. It has to go to a curriculum committee and then a division, and then on to the full faculty. So we work it through the process, but we try to stay really close to what we're hearing through the career advisory board, through our internship programs. So if students are out there on an internship, what are they coming back and telling us? And then keeping an eye on the, what's the market saying in general, reading the literature, looking at what Placers is doing, where are the jobs that you're getting? And then, but you got to keep scanning your environment and bringing that information back and putting it inside the process. I've been pretty fortunate at Goldey because we're small. It hasn't been easy because we've been, inertia is a big force, and who wants to change? If I've not been able to show up to committee meetings for, 20 years, why do I need to show up now to cast my vote for this program or that program? But, getting everybody to buy into the mission of the institution, and this is what we have to do, and then providing them with the documentation of why this is important, gets them focused on what we need to be doing. And I've been fortunate that people have really stepped into that in a big way.
So you didn't start as a president, of course. What does it take to be a president of a college today? I'm glad I made you giggle. But I have found, Colleen, that, folks think we fall off turnip trucks as presidents of companies or presidents of colleges. And, if they stop and think, they know we've made mistakes and we have to learn stuff, and it's not a straight line path. But, what was your path, and what was it like, and what's it take today?
When I went back to grad school after my experience with Kelly Services, I went back and got my degree in counseling. I thought I wanted to be a guidance counselor in a school and, go solve all those issues of understanding who you are and what you can become and how you can have skills that transfer into various industries and all of that. And I ended up working at a college instead. And so I became an academic advisor at a 2-year community college in Oklahoma, of all places. So I went from Pittsburgh to Oklahoma.
You really get around to some of the most glamorous places.
Every time the rents do, I just move. So we, I'm out there and working in higher education in a counseling center. So I did academic advising and counseling. So we were in what was called the Guidance and Career Center. So I did personal and social counseling, but also academic advising, and taught the freshman survey class for adjusting to college, that type of thing. Then I was married to my first husband. We moved to Ohio, and I worked again for a short while in a counseling center, but most of the time I started out working for Ohio State in a similar position, academic advising for one of their regional campuses. Then I went to while I was at Ohio State, I also did a lot of things. What I've developed is a niche for, I'm picked up and put into something that needs to be fixed, and I fix it, and then I move on.
I sense that.
That's my job, is here, fix this. And that I really developed at Ohio State. So the College of Education was making a lot of changes, and Ohio State, as a general institution, had decided they were going to train teachers a little differently. So I had to help navigate that. And then one day I came into work, and the guy who ran the program at a closed security prison, which in Ohio is the step below maximum, he had injured his back, and he was going to be out for several months. It ended up being about a year, so I had to go run that. And then I came back from that, and I worked in the academic dean's office working a lot with the adjunct faculty and the master schedule of classes. From there, I went to a small graduate theological seminary where I had to do a little bit of everything. So worked with the board, served as the HR person, did everything outside the classroom. And then I taught as an adjunct faculty member, worked in fundraising. So my path has been, we had somebody who left who was running the major capital campaign, and the president of the seminary said, I don't want to refill that position from the outside. You and I are going to finish this campaign. All of a sudden, I had to be a fundraiser. So, you just learn. And so all of that came together when I was recruited to my first presidency. All of a sudden, it was like, wait a minute, I've worked in every area of higher education, so I understand how the enterprise runs and how it should run. And that was the training. The traditional route to the presidency in higher ed is usually through the faculty.
Okay.
You become a faculty member, you become the academic dean, the provost, and you go in. But that's really changed. That's the traditional way. But anymore, I've got a doctorate in higher ed administration. And so there are more people like me in those positions now.
So I clearly see how you got to move around in colleges and do all the roles and how that gives you a big picture perspective. Mm-hmm. How is that different from being a leader as president versus all the roles you saw?
You have to be very true as the president. You've got to be very true to the mission of the institution and the student first approach. So every decision you got to think about, how is this going to impact my students? And how, is it true to my mission? And are my students going to be positively impacted? Is this going to help them to achieve their goals and their dreams? And you have to really align with that closely, much more so, you use that kind of thinking in every job. But here is in the presidency, you've got to be that big picture person.
So, and you're repeating that a lot. So is that the same as me saying I have to know where I'm going? I know the values of placers, and I got to make sure I take the customer perspective into mind.
Yeah, my students are my customers.
Or your customers, so I think that's probably really important because you're providing almost like a compass and a map effect for everybody when they get all the ideas and things they want to do and, plans they want to make, but it comes back to how it impacts those two things.
Right.
I see. So you repeat yourself often.
Yes, I do. And sometimes you get tired of it.
Yeah, I've learned, I'm sure you could teach me this, but sometimes I'm repeating a message that I'm bored with on the seventh time, and enough people say, I didn't know that, makes me realize that that's why I have to keep repeating those messages, and that is an operational strength. That it's when you move off of it too quickly, sometimes I think it can bite you pretty good.
Yeah, I'm often asked to step into a mentoring role with different people, and I've just finished up one with the American Council on Education, and they have a women in higher ed program for the prospective presidency. So women who want to become college presidents.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a neat thing. And I'm often pressed into service because I've served now for 15 years as a college president at 3 different institutions. So I kind of have learned the lay of the land. And my mentee, who is just awesome, who I just finished up with, she said she's interviewing actually this week, I guess tomorrow, for a college presidency. And so we were talking about, this kind of thing, like what is it that how do you make decisions, and how are you going to go talk to this search committee about how you make decisions? And one of the things I said to her is, you're going to get so tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. But if you don't do it, you're not going to have consistency in how you make decisions. And people, your employees, your faculty, your staff, your students, they count on you for that consistency. that they know you're going to make a good decision because this is how you make decisions, and you're going to have to keep saying the same things over and over. And she's like, yeah, I know. And that's the part that just concerns me because sometimes I get so tired of saying it. I said, we all hear you, but you got to do it.
So I'm probably projecting my own life onto this question, but I think you can handle it. You know how to be a president, but you've got this added skill of advice and mentorship, with leadership. Do you think there's a difference now for you? Like, because you lead through this mentoring and advising approach in your, I get the opportunity to work with presidents of companies and I coach them. I certainly think my experiences give me credibility when I'm helping them, but I find that I lead my own company with that same kind of advising, mentoring approach as I do other people. I'd just be curious about your experiences.
That's exactly what I do. And since I've been at Goldey, I'm the first person that they hired from the outside in the history of the institution.
That blows my mind. But
yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can, and Goldey well enough to know that, wow, that took a leap of faith for them because they did not hire from outside. So here I come in as their new president, and we're now 137 years old, and I've been here 4 years. So what the trustees said to me was, we know we have issues that we have to get resolved. We have a lot of long-term employees, people that have been here 48 years, 45 years, that just...
It's so impressive in one way. So impressive.
In one way it is. And then in the other way, it's
hard to make change.
Yeah. So we want you to come in and, get us operational in the way we need to be operational, like a not-for-profit higher ed institution, because the trustees could see where the issues really were. And then, and don't come in and clean house if you don't have to. If you have to, that's fine. But, people have, they've been here a long time. And I said, my MO is people don't come to work to fail. They come to work to do the right thing and to be successful in their roles. So I'm not going to come in and clean house. I'm going to come in and everybody gets at least a year to do their job, because why would you, you've been coming to work to be successful for all these years, and you've got, you want to do what's right for the institution and your students. So why would I come in and get rid of you? But what that means is I have to come in and teach people how to do things the way that things should be done. Goldey started as a for-profit institution. As a matter of fact, I've got sitting over on a table in my office stock certificates. So when Goldey started, they sold stock to people. Now, the major shareholders were the president and one of the vice presidents and the president's wife, that sort of thing. But we were a for-profit institution from 1886 through 1969. So,
I did not know that.
Yeah, we were a for-profit until then. And in 1969, they changed the model and became a 501c3 not-for-profit higher ed institution. But they never really changed their model. The chart of accounts, how business was done, that sort of thing, was still in a for-profit mode, and the mindset was very much in a for-profit mode. So, if we make a profit, we're going to sweep that profit into the endowment, not necessarily reinvest it in the institution, which is what not-for-profits do. So, they couldn't give out,
distributions.
Yeah, not anymore, but they kind of, so what they did was they pushed it. And so now we have a very strong endowment, but operationally and programmatically and all of that, there wasn't the level of reinvestment in the mission of the institution. So I've had to help teach about that and explain about that. So I've got, we've had some retirements, and I've got a couple VPs that are also long-term employees, but new in the VP role. But I have to work with them and model model the decision-making, model how you have the conversation with somebody. Because I'm in the fourth quarter of my career at 61. So I'm going to want to retire at some point.
Yes.
And when I retire, my job between now and then is to make sure that this place is viable, has
Yes.
leadership that can continue on, the kind of programs that are needed, all
It's
of it.
not the Colleen show, right? It's
No,
not the
not
Colleen.
at all.
Yeah, no, Dale Carnegie said a long time ago, if you give people a high standard to live up to, they'll probably surprise you,
Yeah,
so the way you're operating is very core to my principles, and I think it makes a ton of sense. And some make it and some don't, and that's okay. You've
yeah,
lived by your standard and given everybody a very fair, very equitable way to make and drive changes. So
that's right. And everybody, what I always want people to understand, and I've got one who doesn't seem to get this, but you can lead. You don't have to be a vice president or a whatever. You can lead from whatever position you're in. There is a leadership role, and you need to embrace that leadership role and do what a leader would do in your position. And so that's my new thing to work on right now with a couple of people.
I think it's a great journey. I do ask similar questions so that listeners expect certain things. And one thing that I always get feedback on, Colleen, is hearing leaders share, their lessons, their valuable lessons. That it could be just there's lots of ways that it comes out. But if you, as a teacher, as an advisor, what would you like to share? You got 60,000 mentees to share something.
That it's really not about you. You had said that just a few minutes ago. And, if you're the leader, you're there to do a job and you're there to do the very best that you can for the mission of your institution. And it's not about you. And when you start to think it is about you, that's when it's time for you to reassess where you are, what you're doing. Maybe it's time to move on. But it should never be about you. And I know a lot of college presidents, a whole lot of them. And I always say to people, like when search firms call me and, what do you think about this person? What do you think about that person? And, we'd like to check in with you on this one. I always say, if the person really, 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 really wants to be a college president, that's not the person you want to hire. You want to hire the person who serves because they can't imagine not serving to make this institution or this, field or this sector of the economy better. That's who you want. You don't want somebody who's about them, because then every decision is about them.
About them.
And that's when schools fail. I see it time and again. Those are the ones that have the most problems. So if you got to check your ego at the door and be about the mission and about helping others and improving society. I have to think that, if I had those steel workers coming through Goldey Beacom, that they would leave here understanding that, they've got skills that can be used across a variety of jobs and sectors, and they would be okay. They would have something to fall back on. But if I was all about myself, I wouldn't even think about that.
When a job seeker comes to see me, or a leader that I'm working with that wants to say they need to make $1 million, I almost inevitably know that that's a problem. And I always try and tell them, if you do the right things, the money will follow, or if that's your goal, right? But if you do the right things, which is what you're saying, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? I mean, especially if you're not where you want to be. I mean, we're talking about a college president, it's different, but a lot of folks are earlier in their journey, and it's hard for them to think like that. They have to think about them. They feel like they have to think about themselves, but it applies at every job. The more you take care of other stakeholders, the better you'll do.
Yes. Yeah. And if you have a healthy organization, everybody's going to thrive.
It seems to me like you're establishing an entrepreneurial mindset and ecosystem at the college presently? It seems like it. That's the way, I see the world. Are there a lot of obstacles to creating such an environment? And, how do you continue to battle it and overcome it and put energy to it all?
There can be, I love the phrase inertia is a big force, and it's a really hard force to overcome. So sometimes you will have people, whether faculty or staff, who are, they're just used to doing what they've always done. They don't feel the need to change. It's been easy to come here for 10, 15, 20 years, and you're going to get a paycheck and you're going to be able to do things, but your classes might not be as dynamic as they could be. Are you teaching? Are you following your field? I've run into situations where after Enron happened, classes in business, business law, business management, something like that, where that didn't even encompass the learning, the Patriot Act, the things that came out after the Enron situation.
Yes.
All of that should be built into that class. It should be built into that curriculum, baked right into it, because that has to do with ethics and morality and all the things that are important for business.
Agreed.
Yeah. And sometimes people are just very content with the status quo, even though they know they ought to be incorporating that stuff. They just don't. And, so getting people energized to do curriculum review in my setting, it's curriculum review. It's, looking at what you charge students, looking at the whole issue of, student loan indebtedness. That's a big topic anymore.
Yes.
So, we looked at it here and we said, okay, we don't want students having to go out and repay big loans. And we had been very generous with scholarship awards over the years, but the problem in higher ed cost is not just the loans; it's not understanding how you pay for college and how that really works. So we said, well, you know what? Instead of us charging a higher amount and giving a lot of aid, and people not really understanding that, why don't we just roll our tuition back? So we took our endowment and we took that endowment spending and we applied it to tuition so that we could cut our tuition by 50%. So we cut it in half.
And you simplified most. There's so much friction in going to college and figuring all that crap out.
Right.
You simplified it.
Yes. And I, the thing with tuition rollbacks like that, with Goldey, we had the endowment to be able to do it. Not every college can do it that way. Typically, colleges take in tuition and then they give it back in the form of aid, and that's how they do their discounting. And so if you're going to do a rollback, it's going to be based. You're going to roll back because you've got an increase in enrollment, so you've got some extra revenue coming in. So now we're going to use that to cut the tuition or reset it or whatever. At Goldey, that's not how we did it because we have this strong endowment. Colleges do it differently. And even that, that's a lot of information for people to try to assimilate. People like me get it because I live it all the time.
Yeah, but it's a strong business advantage to be able to operate. I mean, that provides, business is all about differentiation, whether it's higher ed or staffing firms. So be able to do that, you have a compelling advantage and it's a smart move.
Yeah. And it's a way to use your money in a way that helps students and implements mission in a very logical way.
So go ahead, please.
The valuable lessons too. The one thing I sometimes think about, I don't know why this popped into my head just now, but you have your professional life and everything that you have to do in there, but then you've got the personal stuff that crops up sometimes. And what's the leadership lesson as you go along? And I'm a cancer survivor. So I was just finishing my first year as a college president at a college in South Carolina. I was like 2 or 3 weeks away from my first year anniversary date, and I got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh my goodness.
And so I had, at that point, my trustees were concerned that, well, what if she dies? There's, what's the leadership void that we're going to have and all of that. And
typical trustees.
Yeah. and, a fair question.
Yes.
But, I had to go through surgeries and chemotherapy and lost all my hair and, radiation and all that kind of stuff. So I had about 18 months of active treatment that I had to go through for my particular kind of cancer. And still I had to go to work every day. Throughout that whole thing, I missed 10 and a half days of work total out of those 18 months. And so I had to be there.
I knew you were a badass. Now I know you were. Excuse my friend.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of, I learned that I couldn't be anybody except myself. So I had to go be the leader and do what I did with all of this personal stuff going on and bring that in when it was bring it in as appropriate. Sometimes that's the elephant in the room. It's like, is that a wig she's wearing, or is that,
yeah,
what's going on? So I would talk about it, and I would say, let me tell you how I'm doing today. I'm really slow, so I know I have to speak to this group, so I'm going to sit down when I speak to you because I'm just kind of not feeling like I want to stand up. And I would get that out of the way, and I would talk about what that meant. And I learned I've always been good at delegation and work, asking others to do things. I learned then I really had to do that. And that's an opportunity for that person. I would turn things over to like the provost, and I would say, hey, I really feel like crud. Could you cover this event tonight? Here's what that means. And it gave her the opportunity to go be the president. And she, became
capable.
Really, yeah. And then she started, I said, if you want to apply for presidencies, I'll be right there behind you. I'll support you in that. But it gave
Colleen, did it take a lot of courage to be that authentic? Because, there's a reason that you and I talk and like each other because, I only know that. I only know that way. Don't ask me why, but so I admire it. But was it hard, or did it was the only choice you had?
I think it's the only way I know how to be.
Yeah.
I can't be anything else. And,
I wish you could teach that in a class, and I hope we can help some folks about the value of being that way, because it just gets everything out in the way and out in the open.
Yeah. And I feel like if I didn't have that ability to do that, I don't know where I would be. I certainly wouldn't be as happy in life. That would be problematic because, that if I'm not authentically who I am, and there was a time when I probably tried not to be that way.
Sure. Well, we think we're supposed to be a certain way.
Right. And in my first marriage, it would have been like that. There were a lot of issues there. And, I didn't want the world to know that things weren't rosy, but they weren't. And when I finally started being honest and open and said, no, I'm leaving this marriage. This is not where I need to be.
Colleen, there might be the thought, I'm a step behind you, so I still think this fits, but if I can weave this into your last, there might be a thought from a listener that that's our privilege as president, that we have the opportunity to be authentic, that we can speak that truth because we've created the mission. But I have a sense you're saying that anybody can and should do this. Am I reading you right?
Yeah, and they should. Like I've been doing evaluations for some of our staff, and I have one fella he's great. He is awesome. And he feels like he has to solve all the world's problems, whether it's his mother or his partner or his, any of that. And
that was 1996 for me.
Yeah. Well, and I said to him, that's who you are. And it's okay to come into the office and say, you know what? This is how I'm going to manage my staff, because that's who you are. There's no Goldey Beacom way that you have to manage. You've got to come in and manage your staff the best way you know how. And if that's, as long as you're legal and all of that, if
Yeah.
it's coming in and saying, look, you need some time, take some time. We can be flexible in the workplace. You can work from home tomorrow if you want to. That's okay. And if that's what you need, as long as your job gets done and you stay within your budget, I'm good. But if your job's not done and if you're over budget all the time, then I got a problem. But other than that, we're good.
So the pandemic is still hanging around for all of us a little bit.
Yeah, it is.
How has that influenced leadership, how you approach things, the business, work-life stuff? Just where's it left you and Goldey?
I've tried really hard to allow people the work-life balance that they need. If that means, 4 days in the office, 1 day out, 3 days in, 2 days out, as long as the job is getting done, and as long as the offices are open, because we're in a people business and we're a residential campus. So our undergraduate students, a lot of them live here on campus. So you can't walk into the Fulmer building and have all of our offices dark.
Right.
Somebody's got to be there, but not everybody has to be there every day. So that's okay. So I've tried to make sure that people understand that they can come and go, and as long as the offices are covered and students are served and our mission is implemented, excuse me, then that's okay. They can do that. I've had not very many people who've really taken advantage of that. We have a, person here or there who wants to work, 4 days from home, 1 day in. I'm not sure that their job is being done successfully. At least their supervisors don't really feel that. So, there's some of that has to happen.
I'm making Colleen choke to death here. It's sort of I get her talking so much that she's going to cough. Take a drink, and it's got to be real world here, I think, in so many ways. So I have a fun question for you if you feel up for it.
Go ahead.
You hang around a lot of 21-year-olds, but I'm going to ask it differently. What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Oh, don't rush into relationships. Take your time and make sure that what you end up in terms of whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship, whatever, is growth producing for you. And it's where you're comfortable and where you need to be. I think I rushed into some things a little too early.
Well, I don't know if we know when we're 21, 31, 41, how to spend time on any one thing like that, is this the right relationship? Let me think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's terrific advice.
Yeah. And I think if you have that mentor or that, person who can kind of help you question that point, and that's part of where I see, especially in the college environment, our faculty and our staff can do that. So, a faculty member can say to a student, are you sure this is where you want to go? Let's think about that a little bit. And I kind of wish people had done that. But a small college campus like we are, you can do that. And so I like to think that's one of the intangibles that students get when they come here.
Which becomes very tangible.
It does.
What an advantage.
Yeah.
Those are two very big advantages for the school. And I've been a fan of the school. Folks have allowed me to teach or guest lecture or comment there for a long time. So I always appreciate the approach that the college has with its local people. Lessons to learn, lessons to share, or maybe favorite books you like to hand out. Just curious if
I have an elliptical at my house. I got it back when I was first diagnosed with cancer because I needed I just wanted to be able to work out in the house. I've always been a runner or a walker or a whatever, but I got this elliptical and I am on that every morning because,
Okay.
and I read while I'm on it. So
you've got coordination too.
I do, yeah. And so I, have my Nook, so Nook,
Mm-hmm.
Kindle, so I have that there, and I'm on my elliptical, and I do about an hour every day,
Wow.
and read while I'm on there. And I try to not read anything in higher ed literature while I'm on there. I just finished a book yesterday called Beyond That, the Sea, and it's about a family during World War II, a family in England who sent their daughter to live with an American family. And, about so she lived over in this country for 5 years, moved away from her parents. And that happened to a lot of people. There's, historical fiction. I really enjoy that. And so as I'm reading that, you think about, wow, can you imagine being this, 12-year-old, 11-year-old girl who gets sent abroad to be safe? Life changes with her husband. Those are very formative years. And then, you think back about what does that mean for me? And, what's people's story? What do they bring to the table that I don't happen to know about? And like this gal goes back home to live in England and doesn't really know anything. The war had changed everything there. So that reading beyond your field, keeping a broad interest and understanding, that there are different ways of thinking out there.
I always find I'm my audience can see I've got books galore all around me, but I always, from entrepreneurial mind, that's always the center of things. But I find that no matter what I'm reading, I have this reflection or flash that relates to my current environment or situation. So you're not saying that directly, but I definitely, I don't read Staffing Industry Report anymore, but if I can read a book on stoicism or historical fiction, I maybe it's just because our brain relaxes, but
well, I find when the brain relaxes, you can learn so much more.
Yes.
There's just so much that's out there. There was a book, the one before the one I just finished was called The Lost Ticket. And that was interesting about this man who was on a bus, and he met a woman, and she wrote her phone number on the back of this ticket. And he was in his early 20s. He went through the next 60 years of his life looking for her because he lost the ticket.
You remember who the author of that is?
Sampson, I think.
And what was the name of the first? If we can always get it from here. We'll put it in show notes.
Beyond That, the Sea, was the one that I'm reading that I just finished. By Laura Ash.
So we'll put a link in. It's always interesting. Folks like that kind of thing.
And there are a lot of them that are out, things that just kind of all of a sudden it sparks something in you. So I always encourage people, read broadly beyond not just your field, and I spend a lot of time in higher ed literature too, but it's
you may think less of me, but when one of my employees show up in the office and they say, I'm going to go get an MBA, I say, do me a favor. I'll buy the Wall Street Journal for you and read it for a year. And if you still want an MBA, let's talk.
Mm-hmm.
I think my own version of it.
Yeah.
Go learn the world.
Right. Learn the world. And that's where I always hope our MBA programs focus on the world, not on, the theory of whatever.
I get it.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, and obviously there's some prep that goes in this. Is there any themes or things that you'd like a little open mic time to touch on? Or do you feel like we're getting your story out?
Um, I feel like, there, I feel like we are. There are things that I always hope that people can do in life and leading integrative lives, where all parts of their lives are integrated. I came to Delaware to Goldey Beacom because my mom and dad, my dad has since passed away, but
I'm
my mom
sorry.
and dad lived in Oswego County, New York, in Parrish, New York, where I'm from. So they were up there. My mom is still up there. She lives in senior living. And my son was in Northern Virginia and was in a serious relationship. He has since gotten married and they're now going to have their first child. So I become a grandmother for the first time in January. So, I wanted to get that closer because one of the things I learned is, and I'm sure this isn't new, but when my son graduated from high school and when I had graduated from high school, by the time you graduate from high school, if you go away to college and then, life takes you wherever in the world, by the time you have graduated from high school, you have probably spent 80 to 85% of the daily time that you're ever going to spend with your parents because you're away. So when I think about it, I graduated from high school in 1980 and I lived in Pittsburgh, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Marion, Ohio, Dublin, Ohio, Chittenango, New York, Spartanburg, South Carolina, all these places. And I would see my mom and dad 2 or 3 days a year. So from age 18 till when I moved to Delaware, I was only seeing them 3 or 4 days a year. You'd go up for Christmas, you'd go for, something, but you were far away and you're busy in your job. So I knew if I was going to be able to spend any significant time with my parents before they passed away, I needed to be back here. And so I moved back in 2019. And from June of 2019 until November of 2021, when my dad passed away, I actually saw my dad more days than I had seen him in the past 15 years combined. So, that's it. Family's important to me. Same kind of thing with my son. He graduated from college in 2011 and lived in Northern Virginia. I was living in South Carolina and North Carolina. I wasn't going to see him. So now I'm up here and, but that time, you can never get that time back. And so I always try to encourage people who I work with or people I know, find a way, if that's important to you, find a way that your life can be integrated where you can have meaningful time with your family or the people you want to be with.
It can be difficult for people to think about that tree of their life and label each branch with a part of it, family or spirituality or money or education, and then to be able to think about how they feel about that topic, right? So your integrated thing is, and you're right. When you got a chance, you're very intentional about career and family.
Yeah, and it, you have to know who you are. Like when people ask me to describe myself, first thing, I don't ever say first that I'm a college president at Goldey Beacom College.
That's why we get along.
Yeah. What's salient to me is that I am, I'm married, I have a child, I'm going to be a grandmother. All of those things are what's salient to who I am as a person. That's what matters to me more than anything. I love my work. I love what I do. I think I do it well. I love nothing more than setting the backdrop that students can come in and become who they want to be. But my job and my career is not the salient part of who I am. And I try to help people understand that because you'll see so many, especially young career professionals who they got to make it. They have to make their name. They got to stake their claim. They got to do all that. And I always want to say, chill, know who you are, and go be that person.
You might have had a few things to share with me in my 20s, I would say. And I always argued, and you can argue or discuss, I always thought that if I could just achieve a few things, it would help me figure out who I was.
Uh-huh.
It's almost, that's the whole thing is like, people say, well, that's your view from the top as president. Well, that's an earned privilege. Well, no, you're right. I worked a lot and I don't have regrets, but I know I don't get that time back.
Mm-hmm.
And that having a more balanced approach in life sure makes a lot more sense if that's important to you.
If that's important.
If that's important
it's not important, and that's okay.
Yes.
If career is the important thing, then that's okay. That's who they are.
So I've got one big zinger for you.
Okay.
Okay. What gives you passion today?
Seeing everything working well and in a life-giving way. When I see my organization and the things that changes we have made, for instance, a freshman year experience program. Freshman year experience programs came out in the 1980s. Goldey never had one until last year.
Okay.
And I know, and the literature shows, that these programs have strong correlation to the completion agenda. Students will retain and persist through to graduation if you're orienting them well at the beginning and helping them to understand well what they're going to go through. And so,
Colleen, if I can get somebody through the first 90 days of their job, they're going to be with me in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's what are you orienting them to and what are you orienting them for? So you've got to set that, that's got to be well done. And when I see that, I know that I'm going to have students through college graduation. And, that makes my trustees happy because then my revenue is there. I'm going to end the year with income over expense and all that kind of stuff. So there's the business side of all of that. But I love it when I see it working well because it means that I'm going to be graduating healthy people who, can demonstrate to the world that they can start something and finish something, and they can go out and engage in their career and with their employer in a way that means that they're going to be able to be retained there.
And then they can build on it.
Right.
So when the board of trustees says, Colleen, how'd you do it? It's everything all at once, right? It's
everything together. Yeah.
Everything together.
Yeah. It's the new student orientation. Actually, it's not even starting with the new student orientation. It's starting with your campus visit days. How are you interacting with that student to recruit them to come? And then when they come, how are you, what's the environment you're surrounding them with while they're here to just look at the college? If they decide to come, how are you orienting them? How are you supporting them? Yeah.
So if you're a guest, you come back 2 years from now, what do you hope to be bragging about?
Higher graduation and completion rates.
Okay.
I want to be able to say that because our retention fall of freshman year to fall of sophomore year, our retention has always been very strong, 75, 80%. That's really good.
Wow, that's amazing.
But we start losing from sophomore to junior, junior to senior. Okay. So that by the time you're at the time of graduation, our graduation rate, both the 4-year and the 6-year graduation rate, may only be 30%. That needs to be 80%. So 2 years from now, I'm hoping I can say we've gone from 30 to 50 or 60 or whatever. And so to do that, to get to that point, you've got to make sure you've got the orientation, how you orient them, how you treat them when they're here, how you provide support services for them, all of that kind of stuff, how you mentor them, what are the in-campus and out-of-campus activities, how do you even, we're a part of the Campus Compact, which is campus, it's now called Transform Mid-Atlantic, but the Campus Compact is is getting your students involved in civic engagement.
Okay.
So involved outside the classroom, outside the campus. And every class can have a civic engagement component. Not all of them do, but we're working on that. So for instance, and it's more than corporate social responsibility. So a business class can...
Yeah, my daughter was at Maryland where she was in a civicus dorm.
Yes. That would be what Transform Mid-Atlantic would really applaud.
Got it.
So you want your students to understand the world around them and what does engagement look like there. And then that's another piece of student retention that leads to college graduation. So you got to do it all. And 2 years from now, I hope that I can look at the hard metrics like graduation rates, retention rates. There's something called the NESI, the National Student Engagement Survey. I want our NESI scores to be really high.
Well, depending on my business audience, that's either a 2-year highly achievable goal or a 2-year hard-ass goal, depending on the audience, right?
Yeah.
So whatever you can say. Colleen, it's been great to have you. I'd love to have you back. I hope you had a good time. I think you've shared a lot of great lessons, and I love that you're an advisor, mentor, and leader. I think it's a whole different plane of impact and makes for great discussion.
Well, I would welcome a chance to come back. I always love talking to you.